Lord of the Mysteries. Chapter 348. Terrifying Wraith. A faint golden stream of light flashed past, hitting what seemed like an empty space. However, resplendent flames suddenly rose up from that spot, rapidly forming a silhouette who was wearing a black tuxedo and a dark red cloak. The figure's left arm was burning with holy and pure flames as it continuously emitted faint black and green smoke, illuminating his pale face in dark green glow. It was a man in his 40s with oily hair that was neatly combed with meticulous attention. His eyes were dark and green, and while possessing no emotion, there were no signs of pain. "Wraith Steve!" He turned his head and looked maliciously at Klein, who was at the top of the warehouse. Klein was startled as he felt his body suddenly turn cold. Even the heat brought by the sun brooch couldn't counteract it. His body stiffened quickly, and his eyes glazed over. His pupils reflected the same two figures, a black tuxedo, a dark red cloak, a head of hair slathered with oil, a pair of dark green eyes, and the pale face of a man in his 40s. Almost in an instant, Klein was placed under Steve's control, his thoughts gradually numbing. This was the ability of a Sequence 5 Wraith. It was a strange and hardly defensible ability. Fortunately, he was adequately aware of everything beforehand and was already prepared for it. Moreover, the exorcism effect could effectively resist the possession of evil spiritual beings, so before his ability to think had completely disappeared, he stimulated the spirituality of his soul body and injected it into the dark golden sunbird brooch. Just as he was about to raise his hand to grab hold of his neck, a warm and pure ray of light suddenly descended from the sky. It was like a pillar of light from the sun, bringing with it a feeling of brilliance and holy purification as it enveloped Klein within. It was a spell from the sun domain, holy light summoning. Amidst the holy light, the formless possession ability was weakened, and Klein's eyes suddenly regained their luster. In close succession, his body ignited, becoming brittle and charred, leaving behind a thin piece of paper. At the same time, between the gaps of the two warehouses, Klein, in his double-breasted frock coat and matching silk half-top hat, jumped out of the roaring flames from the previous explosion. His cane had been thrown away somewhere long ago, and the same figure floating above his head had also been successfully destroyed by the flames. It turned into pieces of ashes and scattered in every direction. Before Klein could confirm his situation, he felt an invisible grip on his ankle. There was a firm grip on his calves, arms, chest, and clothes. In his spirit vision, which had long been activated, Klein saw blurry, transparent figures. Some of them were incomplete, some were covered in blood, some of them had burnt black skin, and others were pale and cold. Phew! A cold wind of unknown origins blew at his neck, making his hair stand on end and made his body tremble uncontrollably. The dark golden sunbird brooch in front of him suddenly flashed with a brilliant light, and golden illusory flames started flaring up around him one after another. These flames emitted the aura of the sun, and because they were so dense, they formed a sea. This was the fire of light from the sun domain. The ghastly ghosts around Klein shrieked silently and vanished, and the cold wind at the back of his head was replaced by the scorching heat of the sun brooch. Klein, who was temporarily safe in this environment, couldn't help but sigh in fear. Even though he had prepared ahead of time and had obtained items to counter his opponent, a one-on-one battle with a Sequence 5 Wraith was still precarious. The performance had almost ended in failure from the very beginning. Not too far away from Merrick, the dark red cloak Steve's figure turned slightly incorporeal. The bright flames on his left arm were quickly extinguished under the onslaught of the black aura. His eyes shone with dark green light, filled with malice and desire. He seemed to have lost his mind and ability to think. At this moment, with the shot's warning, Merrick had distanced himself and directed the numb-faced zombies who had crawled out of the earth to surround Werewolf Tyre. He created slippery layers of ice and rotting sludge in an attempt to affect his enemies' movements. Werewolf Tyre held onto the tiny full moon that was emitting crimson light as he ran without stopping. When he was blocked by a zombie, he casually swiped down. Whoosh! The zombie was immediately split into 6 pieces. the long rotten flesh and wriggling maggots sprinkled all over the ground. Werewolf Tyre froze for a moment, looking at his claws in disbelief. Only then did he understand that the augmentation that the scarlet lunar corona brought him wasn't only restricted to speed. He felt that he had mastered some powerful and strange spell. Tyre stopped running and turned to face the pale Merrick. At this moment, zombie Jason was drawing closer to the illusory but mysterious door. His body was covered with dark green vines that had baby faces protruding. He was being dragged by arms that were either full of teeth or were skinless. His eyes were almost touching the crack of the bronze door as he stared coldly at the indescribable eyes hidden in the darkness. It was as if that place was the final resting place for his heart. No! His body, which was controlled by bloodlust and the desire to kill, shouted out shrilly. Werewolf Tyre, who was about to counterattack, stopped instantaneously. Clenching his teeth, he threw the miniature version of the Crimson Full Moon at Steve. Only by allowing a sequence 5 beyonder to regain his strength would he be augmented, allowing the battle to come to a quick end. Only then would Jason have a chance of being rescued. Upon seeing this, Klein's eyes lit up, and he immediately snapped his fingers. Pa! Boom! In the scarlet lunar corona's trajectory, a pre-buried explosive threw up the soil, blew out a strong, impactful gust of wind, and set off a scarlet flame. Being struck by this, the scarlet lunar corona was redirected and landed in another direction. Boom! Another explosive blew up, inducing a fiery light to rise up. Klein leaped up and pounced at the scarlet lunar corona, which wasn't too far from him. Suddenly, a pale palm appeared right in front of the scarlet lunar corona's landing spot and grabbed it. It was none other than Steve, who had disappeared and then reappeared. His instincts made him chase after the full moon. Pa! With a soft sound, Steve grabbed the scarlet lunar corona. His dark green eyes, which were full of malice and desire, gained a trace of spiritual luster. This caused him to return from the form of a pure wraith to a sequence 5 powerhouse. He smirked at Klein. He wasn't in a hurry to deal with this weak opponent, so he let his figure disappear once more. Klein, who had already thrown himself out, rolled twice, reached into his pocket with his left hand, and once again gently flipped open the iron cigar case. He touched Rosego's all-black eye. Amidst the ravings that caused his tears and snot to constantly flow, Klein saw more strange black lines, and from their origin, he caught a glimpse of the invisible Steve. He was closing in on Sharon, who was slumped to the ground weakly, at high speeds. He wanted to control her, rescue Jason, and put an end to the battle. Sharon was their main target for this operation. Klein suddenly retracted his left hand, and with a thought he once again injected his spirituality into the sun brooch. 2. 1. A holy beam of light descended from the sky, enveloping Sharon from behind. Steve, who was wearing a dark red cloak, suddenly appeared a few meters away, barely avoiding the holy light. With the augmentation of the scarlet lunar corona, his speed was already frightening to the point of him being capable of effectively dodging in an instant. But at the same time, the genuflecting Klein had raised his right hand and pulled the trigger of the revolver. His target was Jason. A resplendent bullet flew out, aimed directly at Jason's back, and was about to help him enter the bronze door of mystery. But at that moment, Steve disappeared and reappeared behind Jason, blocking the bullet with his open left palm. Sizzle! The sunlight from the explosion made him shake his arm in pain. He narrowed his eyes as his skin was constantly charring and peeling, but it quickly healed. Suddenly, he heard a crisp sound. Klein had snapped his fingers again. Boom! A nearby explosive exploded. The resulting shock wave and bullet-like stones shot out in all directions. A large number of them landed on Jason's and Steve's bodies. No! With a blood-curdling scream, the clothes on Jason's side tore apart, and the quickly darkening white spots on his skin appeared as if fresh blood was about to seep out. To a zombie with a body as hard as steel, this wasn't an effective injury, but to a person like Jason who was struggling to hold on, it was equivalent to the beckoning of death. He could no longer hold on as those terrifying arms quickly pulled him into the crack of the bronze door. No! Jason's scream resounded into the distance as the mysterious and illusory door closed with a clang, devouring the rest of his screams and isolating it from the world. The clearing in the middle of the warehouses turned completely silent. Jason had completely disappeared, as though he had never been born into this world. Steve's eyes widened, and he opened his mouth, letting out an angry screech. Damn it! Bam! As his voice resounded, Klein felt as if someone had heavily hammered him in the head. His vision turned blurry, and whatever he breathed in smelled of blood. His vision had become blood red. For a short time, his ears were filled with buzzing sounds, and he couldn't hear anything else. After Tyre delivered the scarlet lunar corona, he had grown black fur and sharp fangs. He was no longer immune to its effects and painfully covered his ears. Blood even flowed out from the corner of his eyes and mouth. Merrick, who should have seized the opportunity to grab him, was in an even worse state. His desire and malice, which had been suppressed by the sedative, had reared their heads once more, causing him to almost lose control of his zombies. His expression was extremely twisted,